So I may have splurged a little bit on buying this Japanese maple tree right here, but I'm going to tell you in this video why I spent $200 buying this Sango Kaku Japanese maple to put in my garden. It's also called the coral bark Japanese maple, and that's one thing that I'm going to talk about in this video, as well as I'm going to go through the process of actually planting this, and I'll tell you about the design reasons that I'm putting this in the garden, where I'm putting it in the garden. So let's go take a look at this beautiful tree. So as the name suggests, this coral bark Japanese maple has a very nice reddish tint to the branches. So in the wintertime, it can provide a lot of winter interest to the garden. But also, it is a Japanese maple that can actually handle a lot of full sun. So here in the south, we get a lot of full sun and we don't have a huge amount of shade right around the house where I plan to put it. So this one is going to perform a very important job for me, and that is to create a little bit more shade near the house for many of our other types of perennials that do like the shade, like our Heucheras, Hostas, hellebores, and things like that. So I found this tree at one of our local box stores. I was just kind of wandering in the garden area like you would, like any gardener does. They go and they see what plants they have just to check them out. And I saw 3 of these really beautiful trees. This one is probably, with pot and all, it's about 7 to 7.5 feet tall. Once I plant it in the ground, it'll look more like about 6.5 feet tall. But it is a really good sized specimen. And of course, Japanese maples are always a little bit more on the pricey side because they're highly desired. They're beautiful trees, they're a little bit more rare, and there were only 3 in the whole store. So I came back a couple days later, picked this one up and brought it home, and it is just really a nice looking healthy tree. So I'm very pleased with that purchase. Plus I got to spend a little time with a couple cool birds while I was there. So we've been in our house a little over 2 years now, and we're still filling out the different garden areas and deciding what we want to do. We're kind of taking our time with it. But one thing our previous house had on the left-hand side as you're facing it was a coral bark Japanese maple. Now I bought it when it was a much smaller specimen. Usually I do that when they're in about 1-gallon pots. Reason being they're a lot cheaper, and a lot of the times when you buy a smaller plant, it actually acclimates to the soil better. But this was one thing that had an immediate impact with its current size that I could actually do some things with. So I decided it was worth splurging on. And this is going to be the general area where it's going to go. I've got some things started over here, and some of that will probably get moved because it's a little bit more sun stuff. But in the back over here, we've got Heucheras, another Japanese maple tree, an oak leaf hydrangea, and some different things. But I want some spots that I can put some more shade perennials, divide some hostas and spread them around, and do some things closer up to the house. I've always found that closer to the house, you have fewer issues with deer because they just don't like to approach really close, and we've got a lot of deer. I saw 7 of them this morning just out here in this side yard. So we'll also have to do a little bit of deer protection on the tree to make sure they don't come in, especially in the falls when they like to come in and rub their antlers on different trees, and they can be very damaging, especially to stuff like Japanese maples that are very expensive trees you don't want to have to replace. So the Sango Kaku Japanese maple is actually a tree that gets about 20 feet wide at its most span, and then it goes up to around 25 feet tall. So it is a smaller size tree overall, and that's really good for this location here because we've got this porch, and I don't want to have overhanging branches on top of the roof area for that porch. We've got a gutter there, and I don't want to clog gutters or anything like that. So what I'm planning to do is I'm going to come out 10 feet away from the house. That way there'll be another 10 feet coming out that direction where it will span out too, and from that direction it'll have 20 feet of potential width. That's not to say it's actually going to grow that large. It may not. It may stay more around 15 feet. We don't know just yet. We'll just have to see over the years as it grows. But that is what the current plan is, and I'm going to eventually come from this gutter with a dry creek bed to kind of move the drainage out away from the house. That's really important in any house situation, that you get the water away from the foundation as good as you can. Now the ideal situation is probably where you have morning sun and afternoon shade. In our case, we're going to actually have that reversed, so we'll see how it does. I think it will do fine. A lot of Japanese maples that are sun tolerant are really hardy trees and can do really well in the sun that we have around here. Probably the most important thing when you do have it in a full sun location is just to make sure it stays watered, especially through those drought periods that we are prone to have here in Tennessee. One important thing to note when you buy a Japanese maple plant is that a lot of them, in fact probably most of them, are grafted. So you can tell very easily on this one that this is a grafted section right here. That's the rootstock, and of course up here is the actual coral bark Japanese maple. You can see this little V-notch that was made for the graft, and it's healed together very well. It's almost seamless with very little bumpiness around it. So it's a very nice looking graft. You want to make sure that with this grafted portion here that you don't have growth stemming off from there, because that is not going to be the coral bark Japanese maple. That's going to be the rootstock plant coming up back out. So you want to keep that pruned off if there is anything that ever comes from that. You also want to be sure, and this would be ridiculous to plant it this low, but you want to make sure that you are planting your tree so that the rootstock is above the grade of the ground. You don't want to put this down there where it could potentially grow roots and stems and stuff like that. So we're going to plant it the same way we have it in the pot, where the crown of this is above the ground. This is going to stay above the ground probably about 7 inches or so, and we're just going to be able to enjoy the upper area of the coral bark Japanese maple. So I've gone ahead and I've moved Japanese maple to where I'm going to plant it. It's going to be about right here. We're a little over 10 feet away from the house. That gives us plenty of room. This area is going to become a planting bed for various different things, but I'll probably put in some sun-loving plants right now just to absorb that sunlight and be in there, because we won't have enough shade for a while from this one here. Might be some things like Caryopteras. I've got a couple of plants of that I can put out. I can always make some salvia cuttings or something to put here too. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll cut around the sod area of the pot about 4 to 6 inches from there. And the reason I do that is just to kind of mark the location. Then we'll move the pot and then we'll dig the hole. What I like to do when I'm planting trees is to make sure that I've got a slightly larger hole than what the pot is. I don't really like to make a really humongous hole because I like the roots to eventually grow into the soil that they're going to be dealing with anyway. I don't amend the soil either, because if you amend the soil and make that little spot too rich, it becomes its own little pot, and then those roots do not want to expand outward into the native soil. So what you do instead is you go ahead and you mulch. You fertilize out beyond the canopy of the tree. You could amend out beyond the canopy of the tree, staying a little bit further out, a couple of feet each year. That way the roots continue to expand outward and away from the root ball area, because you definitely do not want to have roots getting all girdled and root bound inside of a planting hole. So in Tennessee, you may need one of these. This isn't such a big rock, but it was leveraged underneath the rest of the soil. Looks like actually a pretty decent little stepping stone rock. We'll not have to save that. So the next thing I usually do is, after I got the hole dug, I do a test fit. So I just bring the plant in, plop it in, get kind of a visual to make sure that the crown of the root is going to be level with the soil surface. And we are spot on with this one right here. Now if I take it out of the pot, I might have to backfill a little bit underneath it because there could be a little volume that needs to be replenished in the hole, but that'll be not a problem. We'll just backfill from what we already had. So let's pull this guy out, put him aside. So in Tennessee we have a lot of clay, and one thing I always make sure to do is I take the edge of the holes and I stab it multiple times in several different directions, because I want to create spots where the roots from the tree can grip into those holes, so it's not just a solid sheet of clay on the sides, because if you don't, then you end up with basically a pot in here. You want those roots to be able to penetrate into the soil, and so this will help a lot with that. Now I like to put a little bit of water in the hole prior to planting so that there's something in there already. So we'll just kind of wet the sides really good and make sure the roots have something they can get access to. we'll do some more watering on it after we get it planted. All right, so we'll very carefully remove the plant from the pot. And I just do that by banging on the sides to kind of loosen the soil up around the edges. And then I'll gently grab the top of the tree, or the crown of the root, and we'll take it out. You can see here we've got a lot of fertilizer that's already in from the nursery where they were keeping it fed for its life in a pot, and it won't need that now because we're going in the soil. But we'll go ahead and toss some of that from the pot into the base there. All right, and we'll carefully lift it up and slide it in the hole. And then we'll check its fit, make sure that we've got the branches in the way that we want them to be. So after a bit of twisting and turning, we finally settled on a positioning that we liked over here, and we're going to go ahead and backfill, but I'll give this a little bit of water before I do that, make sure the root systems get plenty of water. Just be careful when you're moving branches around that you don't twist and turn things, because I accidentally broke a nice looking little branch when I was doing it, so be careful when you're moving your plants around. Then we're going to backfill with the soil that we took out of here, making sure to remove any clumps, or if you happen to see some grubs in there, you don't want to put them back in the hole. But of course, earthworms are welcome. And at some various periods, go on and try to tamp down the soil to get it tucked in and remove any kind of air pockets. Once the soil is covered again, I'm going to give it another soaking and let the soil settle down more, remove more of those air pockets, plus give the tree a good drink. You'd be thirsty too if you were out here. All right, so next up is going to be mulching, and we'll go ahead and we'll mulch around the base of this tree, making sure that we don't volcano the mulch. We don't want to go up around that graft area at all. I'm going to keep a little bit of a nice level area. This is actually a slight slope here. You can't really tell on camera too much, but it goes down a little bit away from the house. So we want to make sure that we continue and keep a natural slope away into the yard, just like that, because we don't want to create some area over here where we end up with a puddle of water. But we're going to go through, and this area is going to get mulched as well. We'll lay down some paper underneath it. You can use newspaper. I don't really like to use cardboard too much, but I've got a thin paper that you typically use for painting that I'll put down. It's just typically used to put down over carpet or something like that. So I'll use some of that down here. We'll mulch over top of that, and that will do a pretty good job of knocking down some of this grass for us. So I fully intended to use this paper product here instead so that I wouldn't have to do anything again with it, but I completely misestimated how much I actually had. So there's not enough here to do this location. Instead, I'm going to lay down this landscape fabric, which I'm not a huge fan of because I don't like using this kind of stuff. It just gets weeds that root on top of it, but I'm using it for the purpose of killing off the sod underneath. So probably in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so, I'll take this back out, but I am going to put a layer of mulch on top of this. I just won't plant anything into it right away, or if I do, I'll just keep it to a minimum as to what I actually plant. So for our first layer of mulch, we're going to use some of this. This is about 1.5 to 2 year old wood chips that have just been decomposing in place. And they're really pretty well broken down. You can see here there's a lot of fine particles and stuff, but it's still good for using as a mulch. It shouldn't take nitrogen from the soil and lock it up in any way. It should be just fine. On top of that, we'll use a decorative mulch to make it look really nice. So we'll just come down, we'll work the mulch around the base of the tree, making sure we're not getting it too high around the trunk, and let it kind of taper off to the side a little bit. We want the mulch to keep the base of the tree cool and help prevent that water from evaporating out of the soil. And so I think I'm going to leave it like this. I'm not going to put the decorative mulch on top of it just yet, because if I'm going to have to flip this later in a few weeks, I'd rather not have to worry about that. Then I can put that stuff back on top of it later. Now, some people are probably going to mention the fact that you're putting wood mulch up near your house and that could be a termite problem. I will tell you that is a possibility, so you need to do routine checks around your house, to just digging in the garden and seeing if you do have termites and stuff. We're in Tennessee, they're very common around here. I will say though that this whole pile has been treated with spinosad because we had a fire ant infestation in it. And of course that will also be somewhat effective against termites too. And I don't have any termites that are coming up in this pile of mulch right here. It could always happen at some point in time. So next up, I'm just going to finish watering the tree and we're going to let this grow. And so there we have our Sango Kaku Japanese Maple planted and ready to grow here in the garden. We'll expand this bed out just a little bit further on this direction, and then it'll go a little further back in that direction eventually, but we've got what we need for today. We'll come in later and we'll flip this mulch bed after the grass underneath has been killed off, and then we'll be able to plant a few other things in here. As well as don't forget about the dry creek bed that we'll put from the drainage downspout to direct the water directly into the grassy areas, because you just really don't want to have your water going straight onto a plant. It's better for it to go out into the yard and away from the house. So if you happen to see one of these Sango Kaku Japanese Maples somewhere and you have a spot for it in your garden, I do recommend them. They're a pretty cool tree, a great plant to have in the garden. So I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Appreciate you watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time here on Growing the Home Garden.